My name is John Pasfield, and the title of this reading will be John and Lewis Carroll, the final chapter. So here is my book, John and Lewis Carroll, Wonderfall. So that's me, John, in my backyard. A door opens up in the lawn, and a bunch of heads peer out of the darkness. Here's the summary on the back cover. As John the writer sits beside his pond, polishing a chapter of his new book, a door opens up in the grass, and the characters from Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass peer up at him from the darkness. John tumbles down, down, down through a hole in the ground to Wonderland, where the characters are busy rehearsing scenes for a third Alice book. Now, there's only 2 Alice books. They want a new Alice book, a third Alice book, which they hope John will persuade their author to write. But what if their author, Lewis Carroll, has other ideas? So it's a bit of a mystery story then. What's going to happen to this request by these characters? Not that John write their new stories, but that John talk to their author to get him to write them. He seems a little reluctant to write this new book. It's always disconcerting to wake up from a dream or a nightmare. In chapter 1 of this book, John is sitting in his backyard and polishing a book, which he's written, and thinking about the fact that he has reread the 2 Lewis Carroll books recently, Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, when something begins to happen to him. He falls underground with the Wonderland characters and spends time with them and with Lewis Carroll for 8 chapters of this book, and then wakes up in his own backyard. Let's listen in on John as he returns to what he thinks of as normal in chapter 10. So this is after he's visited Wonderland. This is when he wakes up in his backyard. I just want to hold this up. This is the book I read in 1970, which is 55 years ago as I'm speaking, and reread a few years ago, and which led to the book that I'm reading from. It's the 2 books. The annotated Alice, annotated meaning there's notes in it talking about Lewis Carroll and his characters and his adventures. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass are the 2 Lewis Carroll books. So these characters want a third book, and they want John to persuade Lewis Carroll to write it. So here's the final chapter then, chapter 10. Let me just get the page here. Here it is. I rubbed my eyes and looked beside me, a patch of grass beside the pond. I must have had a waking dream when my attention slipped a bit. Amazing how vivid sometimes our half-awake thoughts can be. I'll pick up the lawnmower tomorrow. Took it to Dunville for repair. I'll hitch the trailer up and drive into town. I love to sit here polishing. This is the stage I enjoy the most. This is the luxury part of the process. All the decisions have all been made. Now I just read it over and over and over in search of better words. A mystery. An ongoing mystery. It would cut one round of grass and then it would stall. Hopefully they've been able to fix it. I'll cut the grass as soon as I get the lawnmower home. Setting the manuscript down and reaching for blank paper, ideas are coming to me. Best to get them written down. Never know when a few jottings might lead to another book. The kids are looking after the food. All I have to do is clean the house, dust the furniture, wax the floors, set up the dining room, Easter tablecloth, fancy cutlery, and plates. I never learn. I always scribble. Hope I can read this later on. There's always a word or 2 I can't decipher when I type. I'll have to guess what I was thinking when I read it again. I have to check the shelves in the garage. Let's see, there were wire bunnies to stick in the ground. There's a basket of Easter eggs to hide in the bushes in the gardens. Well, whatever else is there, I'll set out too. This idea strikes me as being quite valid. This could be a breakthrough for me. It's only a couple of scribbles, but they could turn out to be gold. The grandkids will decorate the house. I'll get the boxes out of the basement. 7 boxes of Easter goodies she collected over the years. All the artwork that our kids made, too. Sorry, I just flipped the page here. A writer is sitting in his yard. A door appears on the lawn. It gradually opens up, and guess what he sees? Well, it'll need a lot of thinking. More ideas will be needed for sure, but there just might be a novel in this note. We'll hunt for eggs, walk in the woods, have a feast, enjoy the day. You can't beat family when the holidays come around. Hard to believe, though, that my wife will not be here. And that's the end of the book, the end of chapter 10, which is the final chapter. Now, the entire book, John and Lewis Carroll, takes place inside the mind of the main character, me, John. This is the 10th and final chapter of John's thoughts. So this chapter, chapter 10, when read alone, separate from the rest of the book, as I've just done, is somewhat enigmatic. There are items, elements, references in John's mind that would be a mystery to a person who has not read the earlier chapters in the book. The book is written in the book is written in the form of a frame story. So a picture has a frame around it, a book can have a frame around it, a story can have a frame around it. In chapter 1, first frame, John is sitting in his backyard polishing a completed book and wondering what kind of book to write next. Okay, that's frame number 1. Here's the middle then. In chapters 2 to 9, 8 inner chapters, John has a daydream or a nightmare in which he's drawn into the world of the Alice books, in which he meets the Alice characters and their creator, Lewis Carroll. And in this chapter, chapter 10, the second frame chapter, the final frame, John wakes up to find himself still sitting in his backyard and then goes back to wondering what kind of book to write next. So the frame is John in his backyard wondering what kind of book to write next. The story itself is John in Wonderland interacting with the Alice characters, interacting with the Alice author, Lewis Carroll. It's interesting that in the final chapter, chapter 10, the second frame chapter, John has only a very vague memory of what has taken place in his mind while he's been daydreaming or asleep. Most of the references in chapter 10 are to John's normal everyday life, the one that does not involve Lewis Carroll or his characters. Here are some points from that of those elements. John awakes to the grass and pond setting of chapter 1. He recalls the mystery of the lawnmower, which only works intermittently. It works for a while and then quits. He thinks of the pleasure of polishing a completed book and the challenges of making so many decisions in the planning stage of a new book. He begins to jot down ideas which might lead to a new work of fiction. He recalls that his sons and his grandchildren are going to come to his house soon for an Easter celebration. He considers that his handwriting is such that later he will have to guess at some of the words of the notes. He gets a glimpse of what the reader of the entire book would realize is his dream nightmare and considers it as the premise for a next book. Man's in his backyard, a door opens up in the grass, and, well, guess what happens? But the only thing he remembers is what a reader will recognize as chapter 1 of this book, John and Lewis Carroll. A writer is sitting in his backyard, and what the reader will recognize as chapter 2 of this book, and a door opens up in the ground. So in chapter 1, he's sitting in the yard. In chapter 2, the door opens up. That's all that John can recall of his daydream. The final thought in John's mind is to hunt for Easter eggs, which will happen on Easter Sunday when the kids come. John moves between two categories of thought as he rubs his eyes: the everyday world of preparation for the Easter weekend, and the question of what kind of book to write next. So both those things are going on in his mind. And his mind, in a sense, flips back and forth from one to the other. In reading this chapter, chapter 10, I read 6 chapters of thought in John's mind, what one could consider to be John's most conscious level of thought. Perhaps the other 5 segments of thought, the ones I didn't read, might suggest ideas for a book at a deeper level of thought in the writer's mind. So once again then, here is my book, John and Lewis Carroll, Wonderfall. It's available on Amazon, where there's more information. My publisher's website is roxmillspress.com. There's more information about the book there. And on my website, johnpassville.ca, that's all one word, JOHNPASSFIELD.ca. There are 2 books. Both of them are free. You go to the cover icon, you click on them. One is a planning notebook in which I recorded everything, every thought I had while I was planning and writing John and Lewis Carroll. And the other is a reflective journal in which I recorded my thoughts as I was polishing that novella, John and Lewis Carroll, which took me about a month or 6 weeks. So every thought that a writer thinks of after having written a book and is sitting there polishing it. And lastly, I'll say thank you for watching this video.